We're on. We're on. Steve Moran here with Senior Living Foresight, Foresight TV. I know you are seeing a blank spot there. My good friend Denise Scott is joining me. We had one of the challenges of having operators on as guests on a live TV is once in a while, particularly in this world of pandemic, a disaster happens. And that's what happened. So I asked Denise to sort of step in here a little bit. But before we get started, I've got to run my little promo video. I'm going to say this will be the last week you see it, I think, because we got another one coming up that's been almost done that is so cool. It's amazing. So here we go with the promo. Welcome to Foresight TV, where we provide leadership food for the soul, helping senior living organizations have higher occupancy, lower turnover, and better cultures. Today's episode is made possible through the generous support of Connected Living, a technology company that helps senior living communities effectively communicate with residents, families, and team members. Here's today's show. So Denise, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. Yes. I know that you are at the far ends of the United States down in Key West, Florida, enjoying some of that sunshine. And so I'm, sort of feel badly. No, I don't feel that badly about taking it away from you. I'm going to start by sort of giving you an observation I've seen in culture. We're going to talk about culture, and I want to talk a little bit about pandemic, but I realized a week or 10 days ago that I was feeling disconnected from, I have all these friendship relationships with people like you and people all over the country. And I've done a pretty good job of doing phone calls with people and Zoom calls and staying really, really connected. And I sort of realized that, I hadn't talked to you for like 3 weeks, and normally we talk every week, and a bunch of other people, Michael Owens, who is somebody who I normally talk to on a regular basis, and I hadn't talked to him. And I couldn't figure out whether it was me or what, and I was sort of feeling, I'll be honest, I was sort of feeling a little neglected because nobody was calling me. Although logically, I realized that in my relationships with people like you, I mostly do the calling. It's just the way, and that's how it works. And then I was talking to an operator, and this topic sort of came up, and he said, it's really the same thing for me. He said, it's like for the first time in the pandemic, I'm not really talking to people very much. And that really inspired me. And so I got on the phone and I called you and I called Michael and Paul Mullen, a bunch of people, and felt much, much better connected. And my theory is that we are in a new transitional phase with the pandemic. We got lots and lots of people who've been vaccinated. I've got my first one. I get my second one next week. You've gotten both yours already. And so the world is starting to, we think, get better, but it doesn't feel much better. And when we do that, we tend to sort of pull in. And so, you've been doing a ton of work with owners and operators and organizations helping with culture. I mean, that's you're like the culture guru for senior living. What are you seeing?
Well, I think, as you said, are super exhausted and they're tired and they've been running on adrenaline for a year. And so as I think we start to see a light at the end of the tunnel, that some of this stuff is going to start creeping up in organizations and in each of us as individuals as well. It's sort of the that response, right? That adrenaline response is probably starting to slow down a little bit. And so I think some of what just this whirlwind of what's happened for the last year is catching up with people, and they're realizing that it's really hitting many of them. I think even more so. People were certainly tired and exhausted through all of this, but I think now also the emotional stuff is really catching up as well.
So you actually have a course. I want to actually dig in. So you have a course called Fearless in the Face of Crisis, right?
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who've taken it. I'd really recommend that you take a look at that. But not to sort of take away from the course, but it's sort of all about helping people deal with how to be a good leader and a good human being and not go crazy in the middle of a crisis. Can you just sort of, do you have some good tips?
Yeah. So one of the things that we always share with people is to be an expert noticer, and that's a phrase that my friend and person Mary Telesnayak uses, and I just love that concept, especially always as a leader, but especially now that we're really looking out for people, we're really watching people to see how they're doing and checking in with them, and that's always good leadership. But certainly, I think just where people are in their personal and work lives right now, it's more important than ever. So that check-in. I also think some of the self-care stuff is really important. Leaders are trying to keep their team going. I've had some people write me and say, like, I'm drained, I'm running on nothing, and I'm supposed to keep everybody else uplifted. And so this sense to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. And even if that's the ability for a 5-minute walk, if it's calling a friend, whatever it might be, to just rejuvenate yourself a little bit as well, is incredibly important in this process.
Cool. Well, I'm going to actually pick on you a little bit. So what are you doing? What do you do to sort of rejuvenate yourself when you're down?
Yeah. So I did it yesterday. So I just went outside for 10 minutes. I was working all day on my laptop and so forth. And I said, you know what? I only have 10 minutes, but I can go outside and take a walk for 10 minutes. And so I did that. I sneak in. I feel like you're setting me up. You haven't said it, but we have a new course coming out too.
Yeah, I know. We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
But it's kind of all about this stuff. So one of the things I do is I sneak in as much as I can these just little recharges during my day. So when I'm showering in the morning or brushing my teeth or getting dressed, I'm listening to something on YouTube, something that's inspirational. And what that is different for different people. So what I listen to, some people might think is terrible, and you might like something that it wouldn't be for me, but something that makes me start my day off right. And same thing when I'm driving and so forth. I've become super aware of just all the different ways that our environment, the people that we talk to, the music that we listen to, all of this is impacting us in addition. So I've become just super vigilant about people that are really negative, not talking to them. This is not, this doesn't sound like I'm talking about you, but I'm not.
Hey.
But not, that's why I haven't been calling. No, but I just saying, do I really need this person to be talking to this person all the time? And how do I redirect these conversations? And being much more protective of my own energy. And I kid you not, like, people laugh at me, but I don't. There's some people that watch the news; it's on all day when they're home, and I won't do that. Even my choice of reading and music and all stuff, I want stuff that's going to lift me up and make me feel better, not stuff that's going to drag me down and make me feel worse. So that's some of what works for me, but that's different for every person.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find, I grew up in a family where we were all kind of big news junkies, right? And, from the time I was a early teenager, I could hardly wait until, this was back in the days when we still got afternoon newspapers. I'd get the newspaper out and I'd read it. And I lived in a small town, and I started being aware that there were people in the paper that I actually knew, which is really cool. And then, I'm going to confess, I don't know. When Rush Limbaugh first came on, he was actually more of an entertainer than a politician. And for those of you who are old enough and maybe early fans, I really love that stuff. But politics has turned so negative, and it's so tribal that it just, regardless of which side you're on, where you lean politically, the predominant message is one of hating the other side.
Yep.
And if you watch it, it's almost impossible to not get sucked into it.
Yeah.
And
all that up in you, and then you're carrying that to other people. They're
that's right.
off of that energy. So they're either feeding off your energy as a leader, that it's calm and we're positive, and that's how we work around here, which is culture, right? or it's going to be feeding off of this energy of always looking for the bad, the negative, and sort of this. It very quickly goes into a spiral. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. It's kind of just protecting yourself from that.
Well, so here's kind of an interesting question to me. So I have some friends. Some of them are mutual friends to you, where when I get on the phone or a Zoom call, or even if I see them in person, they tend to really be focused on the things that are bad in their life. And the truth of the matter is, everybody has bad stuff in their life.
Yeah.
And to some degree, there's some value in sharing that. I mean, you and I have done that from time to time, but I would say that overall our conversations are almost always way more. We spend way more on the positive and this growth mindset rather than negative mindset. So, is it possible for people to change that, or is that just a personality thing?
Well, it's interesting. Even when we talk about things that aren't positive, what you and I tend to do for each other is like, help me with this, right? I'm missing something. And I say that to you all the time. And I know you say it to me, like, what am I missing here? Help me see this differently. So sometimes I will say to people, okay, depending on what it is, right? I mean, we want to be empathetic to people as well. And so I love the Brene Brown video on empathy, where she says empathy rarely starts with the words "at least," right? So I don't say, "Well, Steve, at least you have a job." There's lots of people that don't have jobs. You shouldn't be complaining, right? So we want to be empathetic, but at the same time, I sometimes will say to people, "Well, tell me something good that happened today," and depending on the situation, once again. Or can we look at it in a way that I read this book? It's called The Art of Possibility this week. I've been reading it, and it's just been so interesting. And he talks about when it's written by the Ben Zander, who was the conductor for the Boston Philharmonic, and he talks about how the students in the conservatory was so just stressed out all the time. It's like the best of the best there. And if they made a mistake, they would completely freak out. So they started this concept of saying, yeah, isn't that interesting, or isn't that fascinating when they made a mistake? And so I've been doing that this last week when something goes wrong, saying, isn't that fascinating? They lost our reservation for dinner. Or, isn't that interesting that, whatever that thing that just happened. And it's kind of funny, but it also just puts a spin on something that you could just kind of continue to go in this spiral of negativity.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing for me is that, as you know, and some of the audience knows, but I used to do, I'm deeply involved in church things, and I'm not doing so much now, but I used to do quite a bit of preaching. And somebody who I really admired as a preacher once said that nothing bad ever happens to a preacher, because everything turns, you can use every bad thing and turn it into a great story, right? And I find that so true in my life, and they become, having these disasters or problems often become the best stories that you can tell. And many times when you get a step away from them, right, they actually become humorous rather than terrible, even though they feel terrible at the moment.
Yeah.
So.
And I would couple sort of that conversation of, because we can also be toxically positive too, right? And so I've been trying very hard this year for myself to practice. This thing happened, and I'm feeling sad about it, or I'm feeling upset about it, or I'm feeling angry about it, whatever. And that's exactly how I should be feeling. And I always put that positive spin on everything, because there's sometimes that stuff just is terrible or it's awful. And so, and the reaction to it should be one of sadness, or one of whatever, anger or so forth. And that's sort of the, to also give ourselves a little bit of grace for feeling that way too.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, I know who it was. Jack, when my mom was in her last few months, I was talking to my friend Jack Cumming, who a lot of you have read his stuff, and he gave me some really good advice. He said, at some point in time, you're going to have tears, and he said, don't try to fight the tears, just let them flow. And it was actually months before my mom passed away, but it looked like she was, just a few days away. And I remember going out into my garage to get something, and I started crying, and there wasn't really any triggering thing. It just hit me.
Just all come
And
up.
and Jack's word said, just let it cry. And I must have stood in my garage for 10 minutes, and I just tears rolling down my face. And I was there was almost a grin, as sad as I was thinking about my mom and the good times and stuff. And so you're right. I mean, it's really important to embrace those moments when like, because everybody has terrible stuff, right? That happens.
Yep. And and that you see that kind of quote all the time of everyone's dealing with something they don't know about. And I try to think about that as well in my interactions with people, that what are they experiencing right now, maybe at home or wherever. But go back to leadership. It's also an opportunity when it's going to be an expert noticer, when we notice some of those things in people, that we can check in with people and how they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. So a friend of mine just sent me a story. Now, this is not senior living related, but I'm going to use it in an article. A kid, African American kid, went to school and he was wearing a hat. He wasn't supposed to wear a hat. And the authorities came and told him, and he just wouldn't take the hat off. And he was really rebellious. And he finally ended up in the principal's office, who was also African American. And he finally got down to, well, why are you being so defiant? Won't take it off. And it turned out that the kid had gotten a haircut that he was just totally embarrassed by. And so the principal said, well, you know what? I actually cut hair, and I've cut lots of kids' hair. Why don't I do that? And he showed him some pictures. And he went home, came back, rebarbered his hair.
Oh my gosh.
And he took his hat off, and everything was wonderful. And it would have been so easy to just say, well, you can't do that. You're a jerk. You're going to be in trouble. You're going to get detention. But he took time to turn it into a positive. And it's an amazing story. Like I said, I'll use it in an article.
Yeah. And I hear stuff like that all the time from team members who say, this person checked in with me at this point, or they asked about my family, or this was going wrong in my life, and the organization was there for me, so I'll always be there for them. And so it's that same concept, right? How are we making sure that we're supporting people, so when they feel supported, they're going to support the organization and the services that you offer in return.
Yeah. So you're actually working on a new course, right? Why don't you talk to me a little bit about that?
I am. It's called the Stability Zone, and it's kind of funny. It's a crowdsourced name. I asked a few Facebook groups, including ours, what should we name this course, and that was the deciding. That was the name that was chosen by far, the Stability Zone, and it's all about sort of what we've been talking about is how can we find this opportunity. I might not be able to sit under a tree for an hour today and meditate, even though that sounds lovely, or go to a silent retreat for a week right now. But how can I sneak some opportunity for self-care into my day-to-day life, home, and work? And also, how can I share that with my team? And so it's a lot of things that are just no time at all, or just a few minutes. That people can use to really put their oxygen mask on first, and then share that oxygen mask with their staff as well. So I don't think there's anything in the course that is anything that costs any money. It really is the opportunity just to kind of take a different perspective on things, or to kind of sneak these opportunities into your everyday.
So here's the struggle I have, that it's sort of a little different, but sort of the same thing is, first off, I want to acknowledge that I'm one of those people who's been just incredibly blessed through the pandemic. We've had growth in the organization. We've been able to make a difference in people's lives. Never had to worry about paying the bills, have saved some money. And so I recognize that my circumstances are very different than what a lot of people are doing. But yet I find myself feeling like I'm almost frantic all the time. So I'm always checking my email, or I'm checking to see what my readership stats are. And so even like when I sit down to read a book, I read a page and then I find myself back on my phone, accidentally not planning to. How do I cope with that?
Yeah, I think we've all trained our brains for that, right? I mean, it's sort of what we, most of us, I should say all of us, but it's what we do, right? We've trained our brains for that. Which is why I like to think about this, just how can we sort of have these opportunities to train our brain in a different way. And so if it's always in a different direction, might it be that you leave your phone downstairs and you're going to go upstairs to read, or you make it hard to be on your phone? And I've done that, not wanting to be on the phone in bed before I go to sleep. Well, if the phone's downstairs, that's a lot easier to do, right?
Yep.
Without being on the phone if it's not even there. So, part of actually in the course, we talk about your environment and how do you set your environment up for your own well-being. And so, I mean, it's little things like, or maybe they're big things, right? But it's all these little things that are adding up to impacting our well-being. We actually have an assessment in there, and I guess that's a fancy word for it, but really just kind of you rate it. Is this piece of my life causing me stress or bringing me joy? And there's some choices in between there, but looking at all different aspects of your life, and one of them is the environment. And it's crazy, but these little things that keep on popping up that are annoyances, if we can eliminate some of those, that eliminates a lot of that frustration during our day. And I'll give you a perfect example. My kids were always stealing my phone chargers. So I never had a charger in the car, and I get in the car and I'd be annoyed. Or I'd go to bed and the charger's gone from my bedroom or whatever. So it was sort of like, I know it sounds so silly, but it's those sort of, I describe it as sort of mosquitoes, right? If one mosquito bites you, it's okay. But if you go into a swarm of mosquitoes and you get bitten 100 times, it adds up, right? It's pretty annoying.
So what did you? So I'm actually dying to know. So what did you do about the charger problem?
I bought a whole bunch more chargers, and one that you just lay the phone on, and it charges. I'll tell you another stupid one though is pens. Like I'm really crazy about what pens I like to write with. Do you have that certain pens you like to write with?
Yeah, kind of. It actually changes over time, right? So right now I'm actually into felt tip pens. Remember the old flares this isn't a flare, but I'm into felt tip pens.
So do you find yourself when you go to get a pen, you're looking for that pen or a version of that pen? And so that's with me. And so I'd be looking, like I have 9,000 free pharmacy pens and home care, whatever else. But I've been looking for my pens, and I'm thinking, I can spend $20 and go order 20 pens or whatever it is, the pens that I like, I like the poppin' ones. But some of that silly stuff, and it sounds kind of crazy, but all of that, even the environment that we're working in, like what does our desk look like? And I don't know if you ever clean your desk, but when you walk in and your desk is clean, it just feels good. And so, setting up our environment around us in a way that's going to not stress us, because there's all these other stresses perhaps we can't control. The things that we can control, making sure that we do that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and I think, as you say, I mean, it's got to be different for everybody, right? So, if I walk in, my desk is clean, it's just a surface to get messy again. So it doesn't, it's different. And I think that really the key is trying to figure out the stuff that really works for you.
Important too. And that's why, even this assessment based on what brings you stress or brings you joy, or you feel content with, or whatever. It's based on what you think, and your answers we may have been in the same exact situation, but your answers are going to be different than mine. And it rates everything from even the relationships you have at home and at work, and what are you doing for self-care, exercise, eating, and so forth, sleep even, but how we consider and sort of how all of that is impacting us.
So I actually there's something here I'd really like to dig into, and I don't know if we've ever even really had this conversation very much. So when I was younger, we were really struggling, as my kids were little, and we were just struggling to pay the bills terribly. And one of the things I sort of had this vision of was that I could really achieve peace in my life if I went out on a solo backpack trip for 3 days. And so I scraped together some really inexpensive stuff. I drove up to the mountains on a Friday afternoon, and I was going to stay 2 nights. And I got up there and set up camp. And I realized I wasn't exactly conscious, but I realized that I wasn't as happy or content as I thought I would be. And then it got worse because it started raining. and it was high in the elevation. It was cold, and I was miserable. And the tent I had was something called a tube tent, which is just this big round plastic thing that you kind of crawl into. And I would manage to stay dry. And I did some fishing, and the fishing was okay. And then I actually noticed there were some people camping down a ways, and I sort of walked down to visit with them a little bit, mostly because I was so lonely. And this was like this great revelation for me because, and I think what happens is sometimes we have these things that we think make our lives better and actually don't, right? And how do we figure that out? And how do we maybe acknowledge that? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know what that exact saying is, or who said it, but that saying of wherever you go, there you are, right?
Yep.
I could say, like, I want to go to wherever, I went to Fiji last year before all of this, right? But wherever you go, there you are. I mean, I loved it and enjoyed it, but it's, the escape, had I not, been with the right mindset, I wouldn't have felt like any different. So actually, in the course too, one of the things that we cover is this sense of looking at your personal values and thinking about this sense of how you want to feel. So not having goals necessarily that are goals like I want to run a marathon, or I want to have dinner every single night of the week with my kids and be home for that. Because often what happens when we set things like that, then we wind up more frustrated. But this sense of how you want to feel. So I would say, what feeling did you want to get from going out on that hike in the woods? And how can you get a bit of that feeling into your everyday, or at least your every week? And so kind of thinking about it. So for example, I write in my planner each day, and I don't have it here, but I write in my planner each day the feelings that I want to have. And so one of my things is be strong. Which is not just like physically strong, but mentally strong. Be illuminating, like to make others feel better about themselves and so on. But I can sneak that in when I go to CVS by saying to something someone at the counter, right? Or I can fit in the be strong and just do my 10-minute walk if that's all I can get in. And so I love that sense of, what are my values? What do I want to how do I want to feel? And then looking, how is my day matching up with that? And lots of days it's not going to, but is there something different that I could have done today? Like, maybe it was for you independence, or I don't know what it was that drove you to think that would be the answer. But whatever it was, you didn't get that feeling when you were on that. It's instead of chasing that goal, it's sort of chasing more so that feeling.
Yeah, and what's actually weird about it is today I actually do quite a bit of solo backpacking. I tend to be short trips, so it's me and the dog often. But I also, I used to be, people always sort of laugh or shake their head, but I used to be really, really shy. Yeah. And so I'd have a hard time starting conversations. And of course, now when I hike and I cross paths, I have lots of little mini conversations. So usually by the time I get into camp and I don't have other people except me and the dog, I'm actually really, I actually like it. I read, or I listen to recordings of podcasts or those kinds of things. And so these things even change over time. The one other thing that I'd sort of like to add to this advice giving or ideas is that one of my unique gifts is I tend to be able to see the gifts or the positive in small things. I teach a bunch of fifth and sixth grade kids at my church every weekend, and after the class was over, this has probably happened a year ago now. Sorry about my dog is crying in the background there.
Bailey.
That's Bailey. That's Bailey, dog. You've got Bailey. Anyway, I after class was over, this kid came up who I didn't really know real well, and he had a question about a giveaway that I'd given it, and my first thought was that this is sort of a dumb. The question didn't seem to make any sense why he asked me that. But I actually said, well, I answered his question, and I asked him about it. There was a gift card, and he wanted to know how much money on it. And I said, well, I don't know, it's either $1 or $20. And I said, you haven't used it. And then he sort of stopped and he looked up and he said, I just wanted you to know that this is my last week here. And I'm moving across the country to go live with my dad. And so, we talked some more about it and, but what he was really saying to me, and this is the thing that I took away from it, was that in just this hour a week that I was spending with him most, 3 or 4 times a month, that I'd had this huge impact on his life, big enough that what he was really, he'd never, he would not even be able to verbalize it, but it was like his way of saying to me, you made a difference in my life. Yeah. And I think there are times where we're having huge impact on the world, on people's lives, and it's so easy to gloss over it and think it's not significant, because I think most of us have lives that are way more significant than we think towards other people.
Yeah. That book I was telling you, I was reading, The Art of Possibility. They talk about this concept of giving everybody an A, and they tell the story of like the Michelangelo, the artist, saying that each piece of marble is just basically waiting to get sculptured, chiseled into this beautiful sculpture. And how do we apply that to people? And so how do we look at people and say, what's inside of them that's waiting to come out, that we can help bring out in them? And this concept of sort of giving everybody an A, assuming that you do this to me all the time, right? They're trying their best, right? Assuming they're trying their best, and how do we help them to be their best? And that impact that has on others, as well as, many of us, I know I find that bucket filling. It's sort of my illuminating value that I talked about, and I know you do as well.
Yeah, I think that, and you introduced me to Paul White and the 5 languages of appreciation at work, and it's something that really sticks with me all the time. And I realize more and more that this idea of service is it probably is close to equal with words of affirmation. But but when I can go make a difference in people's lives, it's probably higher for me by a little bit than words of affirmation, although often they go together. And I think figuring out where you can tap into that is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, and helping others to tap into it, because every person working in your organization has that same need, right? That same need for purpose. And so what does that look like for them? Which is why I love using these tools that we use with everybody, not just leaders, but we've used them with nursing assistants and housekeepers and dietary aides and so forth. And they get as much out of it as leaders do, because we all are, at the end of the day, people, right? Trying to live with purpose. And so I think our job as leaders is really, how do we help people do that and not put up barriers or stand in the way of it? Interestingly, culture has improved in organizations during this pandemic. And one of the reasons is because there's less hierarchy, less bureaucracy, more teamwork, the silos have come down. So it's sort of like we removed a whole bunch of barriers to people working purposefully. And now the challenge is, as we get to this, to the end of this, how do we continue those good things that came out of it, right? The bad stuff, thankfully, hopefully going to be gone. But how do we continue the good stuff, like helping people really connect more and feeling more purposeful in their work? Because that's the good stuff that's come out of all this.
That's right. So we're about out of time here. How do people find out about your courses and stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so I'll drop a link in the chat here to the course, and you can also check us out at cultureoutcomes.com. So cultureoutcomes with an S.com, and I'll drop that link in as well.
Great. So we'll actually take and get that link and put it into the body of these ones on social media once it's over. But the other thing we'll offer is that we've got a new texting community that we're just in the process of building. And if you'd like to be a part of that, if you text the 2 letters TV to 916-659-5287, we will actually take that list and we'll send out these links to everybody via text on that, so you can access it. Denise, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for your passion for changing the world, for helping other people's have better lives, have more joyful lives. It's our legacy, and it's just a wonderful thing. And so I really appreciate that you do that.
Yeah, appreciate being your friend.
So, and with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Why don't you stay on for a minute, Denise, and I'm going to stop the broadcast.
Awesome.